Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into what is honestly probably the greatest financial redemption story in the history of music. We are talking about a working-class kid from Liverpool who helped write the actual soundtrack to the 20th century, ended up losing the rights to his own legendary work, and yet somehow still built an absolute empire. It's a gripping business thriller, and I am so excited to take you through it.
Okay, let's just dive right into this, because this is the fundamental question here. How exactly did Paul McCartney become a billionaire when, for decades, he didn't even own the publishing rights to the vast majority of his biggest Beatles hits? It's a staggering irony. Just imagine creating the world's most valuable music catalog, the songs that literally defined a generation, and then having to sit back and watch someone else cash the biggest checks. Most artists would have been totally financially crippled by that kind of loss, but McCartney, he actually used it as fuel.
Just let this number sink in for a second. As of 2026, Paul McCartney's estimated net worth sits at a staggering $1.3 billion. He's comfortably the wealthiest rock star in British history. But here's the real secret to this massive number. While the world sees a legendary performer up on stage, behind the scenes, this immense wealth ultimately came from a relentless focus on ownership, not just performance. And to understand how he got there, we have to go back to a very painful lesson.
So let's look at what I like to call the ultimate publishing irony. Back in the early 1980s, McCartney was collaborating with a young Michael Jackson. They had those massive hit duets together, The Girl Is Mine and Say, Say, Say. Well, during this friendly period, McCartney actually sat down and gave Jackson some seasoned business advice. Having tragically lost his own stake in Northern Songs, which was the company that originally controlled the Beatles' catalog, McCartney explained to Jackson just how incredibly lucrative music publishing could be. He taught him the immense value of owning other artists' catalogs. Jackson even joked to McCartney that one day he was going to buy the former Beatles songs. McCartney just laughed it off, thinking his friend was making a harmless joke. I mean, imagine literally handing someone the exact playbook they're about to use against you. Well, it turns out it wasn't a joke at all. Jackson took that advice straight to the bank. In late 1984, Jackson's lawyer offered $30 million for ATV Music, which was the company that now owned 251 Beatles songs. By August 1985, Jackson had completed the purchase for $47.5 million. He essentially applied McCartney's own advice to completely outmaneuver him, buying the Beatles catalog right out from under him. And the growth of that asset over time? It's just wild. Jackson later sold a 50% stake to Sony for $95 million, and then in 2016, Sony bought the remaining half for a massive $750 million.
Now, what's really interesting here is how raw the emotion surrounding this deal was for McCartney. He later said, "I think it's dodgy to do something like that. To be someone's friend and then buy the rug they're standing on, you can truly feel the personal and financial betrayal in that statement. It permanently fractured their friendship. In fact, McCartney actually asked Jackson for a raise in his royalty rate years later, and Jackson just coldly replied, "Oh, Paul, that's just business." Ouch. It was a harsh, bitter lesson.
But hey, instead of just wallowing in that bitterness, McCartney completely pivoted. If ownership was the name of the game, he was going to master it. He took this devastating loss and channeled it into an incredibly aggressive acquisition strategy, building up his very own publishing company, MPL Communications. McCartney realized a fundamental truth. True wealth isn't just about creating hits, it's about administering those copyrights for the long haul. So McCartney goes on the offensive. He starts buying up the legendary catalogs of other creators, particularly the American songwriters he actually grew up idolizing. Which is just brilliant when you think about it. He bought the music of his own heroes. In 1973, he acquired the publishing rights to Buddy Holly's catalog. In 1976, he dropped $15 million for the Edwin H. Morris catalog, handing him massive Broadway standards. He grabbed Frank Loesser's catalog in 1979, and in 2003, he secured 23 rock and roll classics from Carl Perkins, including Blue Suede Shoes. He became an absolute tycoon who secured his wealth by owning the legendary catalogs of others.
And that relentless strategy brings us to this massive number, 25,000. Yep, today MPL Communications administers over 25,000 songs worldwide. We are literally talking about almost 100 years of music history housed under one roof. This generates continuous royalty income and highly lucrative synchronization licensing for film, television, and commercials. For example, when they made the Buddy Holly story film back in 1978, MPL licensed the music and reaped the financial rewards. Imagine getting a paycheck every single time a movie or a TV commercial uses a song you own. It is a highly sophisticated, totally passive revenue engine.
But building an empire isn't just about acquiring assets. It's also about fiercely protecting the brand you've built. McCartney's legal team is incredibly savvy. They have aggressively defended his image and trademarked his name globally. Just to give you an idea of how seriously they take this stuff, in January 2025, MPL won a massive $14 million default judgment in a U.S. federal court against online counterfeiters who were selling fake merchandise. When you build a billion-dollar brand, you absolutely have to build high walls around it.
Now, building an empire behind the scenes is great, but McCartney never actually stopped being an active, working musician. Deep into his 80s, he still remains one of the highest-grossing legacy performers on the entire planet, playing these incredibly demanding shows that span all the way from his earliest days with the Quarrymen to his latest solo tracks.
And this brilliantly illustrates his ongoing commercial dominance on the road. $130 million. Think about that. That is what his 2022 to 2023 got back to or grossed. The ticket sales, the merchandise, the VIP experiences, it all proves his immense, enduring relevance across multiple generations of fans. He isn't just sitting around relying on his past royalties. He is out there actively monetizing his legacy live, year after year.
Then there's his third pillar of wealth, and it's a bit more quiet. We're talking about a quietly built physical empire, a global real estate portfolio. McCartney has assembled a collection of properties estimated to be worth £125 million, so that's over $150 million US dollars, spanning roughly 1,200 acres across the globe. This isn't just about having luxurious places to live, it's a very calculated strategy that perfectly balances his family's need for extreme privacy with massive long-term asset appreciation.
So the crucial point here is the sheer return on investment on these strategic holds. It's unbelievable. He buys his Cavendish Avenue townhouse in London way back in 1965 for just £40,000. Today, it's estimated at £22 million. He bought High Park Farm in Scotland in 1966 for £35,000, and that's now worth around £5 million. And his Blossomwood Farm in Sussex, acquired in 1973, is now a £10 million organic farming estate. His average hold time is over 35 years. He's generating massive wealth through sheer strategic patience.
But look, all of this, the massive publishing empire, the record-breaking tours, the sprawling real estate, it all leads back to the core of our story. Because the one thing he always truly wanted was to reclaim his own music. And finally, after decades of waiting, McCartney orchestrated his final triumph and won back his life's work. It all came down to a pretty brilliant legal maneuver. Remember that early tragedy of signing away the Lennon-McCartney catalog in the 1960s just because he didn't understand the business? Well, McCartney found a way to undo it. He utilized the 1976 U.S. Copyright Act, specifically a rule that essentially acts as a legal reset button. To put it simply, this law allows songwriters to recapture their rights exactly 56 years after the music was originally published. Following a 2017 lawsuit, McCartney used this exact provision to reach a confidential settlement with Sony/ATV to finally begin taking it all back.
And that brings us to this glorious number 178. That is the exact number of Beatles songs Paul McCartney is systematically reclaiming right now. Starting in 2018 and continuing right through 2025, his U.S. publishing rights are reverting back to him as they hit that 56-year mark. He's effectively regaining 50 to 60% of his U.S. Beatles rights, bringing his journey completely full circle. The catalog he lost as a naive young man is now firmly back under the protection of his own company.
Paul McCartney didn't just write the soundtrack of our lives, he authored an absolute masterclass in business resilience. He took the ultimate betrayal, built a $1.3 billion empire from scratch, and waited half a century to get his life's work back. True generational wealth, as we've seen, isn't just about what you create, it is about what you own. So, my final question for you is, what will you own?